I guess we all have those moments when life feels like it's just passing you by. The kind of days when you look at your reflection and wonder how you got here. You know what I mean? You've got a good job, a decent place to live, and yet there's this constant feeling of not being enough. And no matter how much you try to ignore it, that voice in the back of your mind keeps telling you, you're not doing enough. You're not enough. I'm Jason. I'm 45, married to Emily. We've been together for over a decade now. I've got this idea in my head about what a successful life looks like, but I've never quite managed to get there. I'm stuck in this loop, working hard, trying to make ends meet. Hoping something will click one day, but it never does. I thought once I had money, or a house, or a better job, things would feel different. I thought those things would make me feel like I was worth something. But here I am, still in the same place, still chasing something I can't quite reach. And no matter how hard I try, it feels like I'm always falling short. I think that's the hardest part. I've spent so much of my life thinking that if I had more, if I just achieved more, I'd feel good about myself. But it's like, the more I try, the more I realize I'm never going to be the person I keep imagining. And that makes me wonder, maybe I'm just not enough. Maybe I'm never going to be the guy who has it all together. The guy who can make it happen. And that brings me to Emily. She's my wife. We've been together for a long time, and I do love her. But lately, I've been wondering, am I really the man she wants? Am I the kind of man who can give her everything she deserves? Or am I just holding her back? Emily never asked for anything big from me. She's always been supportive, always been there for me. But I can't help but feel like I'm failing her. Like she deserves more than what I can give her. She deserves someone who doesn't question himself all the time. Someone who isn't always afraid he's not enough. It's hard to admit, but I've been thinking it more and more lately. Maybe Emily deserves someone who can give her everything I can't. Someone who's confident, someone who doesn't need to constantly prove himself. And it scares me to think that maybe that someone isn't me. I think that's the hardest part. I don't want to lose her. But I'm starting to wonder if she needs something I can't give her. Someone who can stand up and say, I've got this. I'm the man you need. And I'm not sure that's me. I keep wondering. Am I good enough? Or am I just pretending to be? And then there was Emily. She's always been supportive. Always believed in me, even when I didn't believe in myself. But lately, I started to wonder, was she just being kind? Or did she see the truth too? Did she know that I was struggling and pretending like I wasn't? Was I fooling her too? She's been distant lately, and I don't know if it's just me overthinking things, but it feels like something's off. She's been busy with work, with her own life, and I can't help but feel like she's slipping away. I try to tell myself it's nothing. She's just busy. But the more I think about it, the more it seems like she's pulling back. And the more I feel inadequate. I find myself asking, is she happy? Am I making her happy? And what scares me the most is that maybe she's not. Maybe she's seeing me for who I really am, not the guy I want to be, but the guy I am right now. And I'm not sure if she's okay with that. I guess that's what scares me. That maybe she deserves someone who isn't so caught up in his own mess. Someone who can stand tall and offer her the life she deserves. And I'm starting to wonder if I'm ever going to be that guy. But here's the thing, I can't stop wondering, what if she's already figured it out? What if she knows I'm not the man she thought I was? And that's why she's pulling away. I don't know if I can face that. But I'm starting to feel like I have to. It's funny how you can be sitting right next to someone, living in the same house, sharing meals, and still feel like you're a million miles apart. That's how it's been lately with Emily. We're still together, we're still going through the motions, but it's like there's this invisible wall between us. I feel it, and I think she does too, even though neither of us talks about it. I can't pinpoint exactly when it started, but one day I realized it. We'd be sitting there watching TV, or eating dinner, and it just felt off. It wasn't that we fought, or that we didn't care about each other. It's like we were just existing together, without really connecting. The conversations became more about what needed to get done, what the next day's schedule was, the things that don't matter in the grand scheme of things. We stopped talking about the stuff that used to matter, our dreams, our plans, what we wanted for our future. I missed that. I tried to push it out of my mind, but the feeling kept creeping back. I started to wonder if it was just me, if I was overthinking things, looking for problems where there weren't any. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I wasn't the only one pulling away. Emily was too. She'd get home from work, go straight to her room, or bury herself in something else. I'd tried to start a conversation, and it felt like she was just distracted. I can't blame her. Maybe she was tired, or maybe she just needed some space. But it still hurt, and it made me feel even more distant from her. It wasn't like we were fighting, but it was this subtle, constant feeling that we were no longer on the same page. I wanted to fix it. I wanted to be the guy who could make her feel seen, make her feel wanted again. But it felt like no matter how much I tried, I was failing. I started questioning myself more, my worth, my ability to be the partner she needed. I'd think, what's wrong with me? Why am I not enough? Why am I not making her feel what she used to feel for me? And that's when the doubts really took hold. I started looking at her, trying to see if there was something I was missing. Maybe she had someone else in her life, someone who made her feel the way I used to. It's a horrible thing to think about, but I couldn't help it. I'd see the way she'd glance at her phone, or the way she'd sometimes smile at things that didn't involve me, and it made me wonder. Was there someone else? But maybe I was just projecting. Maybe I was the one who was distant. The one who wasn't giving her what she needed. I didn't know anymore. All I knew was that I felt like I was losing her, and it terrified me. The more I thought about it, the more I realized, maybe the problem wasn't Emily. Maybe the problem was me. Maybe I wasn't the man I thought I was. Maybe I wasn't the man she needed. And that thought, knowing that I might be the one who wasn't enough, hit me harder than anything. I started to think maybe I was holding her back. Maybe I was the one causing this distance. But what scared me more than anything was the fear of never being able to fix it. I didn't know how to close that gap. And I didn't know if I even could anymore. I've never been good at confrontation. I guess I always figured if I didn't talk about something, it would just fix itself. But after weeks of feeling this distance between Emily and me, I couldn't ignore it any longer. The silence, the subtle changes in her, in me, everything was building up to this moment. One night, I couldn't sleep. I kept tossing and turning, thinking about the way things had changed between us, wondering if this was the beginning of the end. I knew I had to talk to her. But the problem was, I wasn't sure what I was even going to say. What do you say when you feel like you've been failing, when you don't even know how you got here? But I couldn't let it go on like this. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine when it wasn't. So, I decided to just go for it. I walked into the living room where she was sitting, flipping through some old magazines, not even looking at me. I stood there for a second, gathering my thoughts. "Emily, we need to talk," I said. It felt awkward just saying it, like I was admitting defeat before we even started. She looked up at me, eyebrows furrowed, clearly caught off guard. "About what?" she asked, like she didn't know exactly what was coming, but sensed the weight behind my words. I took a deep breath. "About us. About everything." My voice cracked a little, but I kept going. "I don't know what's going on between us, but it's not what it used to be. And I feel like I'm losing you. And I don't know how to fix it." She looked at me, her eyes searching mine, like she was trying to read something I couldn't even explain. She didn't say anything for a long moment, just kept staring at me, almost like she was waiting for me to keep talking. I pressed on. "I know things haven't been great, Emily. I know I've been distant, and I don't know how we got here. But I can't just keep pretending like everything's fine. I'm scared. I'm scared I'm not enough for you anymore. I'm scared I'm not the man you need." I could feel the tears building up in my eyes, but I pushed them back. I couldn't let myself break down now. "Not yet." She finally spoke, her voice softer than I expected. "Jason, I've been feeling it too. I've been feeling like we've been drifting apart for a while now. I just didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't want to hurt you. But we can't keep pretending either. Her words hit me harder than anything. She felt the same way I did. She was pulling away too, and I had been blind to it. But at least now we were finally talking about it. And as much as it hurt, it felt like a weight had been lifted, even if just a little. I don't know what's going on with us, Emily, I said, my voice shaking. But I don't think we can keep going like this. I don't want to lose you, but maybe we need some space. Maybe we need to figure out who we are without each other. Her face softened, and I could tell she was fighting back tears too. I don't want to lose you either, Jason, she said, her voice cracking. But I think you're right. We've both changed. And maybe we need to figure out if we can find each other again. Or if we need to move on. I could feel my heart breaking, but I knew she was right. She was right. We had changed. We weren't the same people we were when we first met. And maybe we were holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. We didn't yell. We didn't fight. But in that moment, I knew we had reached the point of no return. We both needed time to figure out who we were, apart from each other. And that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do. After that conversation, things felt different. Emily moved out. It wasn't dramatic or messy, nothing like the fights I had imagined in my head. It was quiet. Painful, but quiet. She didn't go far, just stayed at her sister's place for a while. But even though she wasn't physically here, it felt like the space between us had doubled. The first few days, I just kind of floated through life. I didn't really know what to do with myself. I'd come home to an empty house, sit in front of the TV, and it would hit me all over again. She wasn't here. And the silence. God, the silence was deafening. It felt like I was hearing my own thoughts for the first time in years. And honestly, it was terrifying. I spent a lot of time thinking about what went wrong, thinking about why I was always chasing this idea of success, of being the perfect guy. I started wondering if that's all I'd ever been doing, chasing something that didn't even matter. I'd spent so much of my life trying to be the guy I thought Emily needed, or the guy I thought society needed me to be, that I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I definitely didn't know what she needed. But there was something else I had to face, something that hit me harder than any of those thoughts. The fear that maybe we weren't supposed to be together anymore. That maybe we had both outgrown what we had. That was the hardest thing to admit to myself. The thought of losing Emily. It was unbearable. But at the same time, I wondered if we had just been holding on to something that wasn't there anymore. I was stuck between two realities, wanting to fight for her, wanting to fix everything, but also wondering if maybe it was time to let go. I spent so many nights lying awake, thinking about what life might be like without her. I thought about the future. Would I be okay? Would she? Was there a way back? I tried to focus on my work, tried to bury myself in something else, but it wasn't working. I'd see a couple holding hands at the grocery store, or hear a song we used to love, and my heart would sink. The pain of missing her, missing us, was almost too much to bear, but then I started asking myself some tough questions. What did I really want? What did I need? And more importantly, who was I outside of this relationship? I needed to find myself again. Not just for Emily, but for me. I couldn't keep living this way, hoping to fix everything by just trying harder. I needed to change the way I saw myself. And slowly, over the next few weeks, things started to shift. It wasn't easy. It wasn't a sudden breakthrough or some dramatic moment. It was small moments, realizing that I could be okay on my own, that I didn't have to be this perfect version of myself to be worthy of love, that I wasn't just defined by my failures or my successes. I started focusing on the things that made me feel good, spending time with friends, going for long walks, reading books I had put off. I tried to reconnect with myself, and for the first time in a long while, I actually felt peaceful. Not perfect. Not everything figured out. But peaceful. And then one evening, after a few weeks of this new routine, Emily called me. It was a simple, unexpected call. She didn't say much at first, just asked how I was doing. I could tell from her voice she was trying to tiptoe around the tension between us. But something about that conversation, something about hearing her voice again, made me realize that maybe I wasn't the only one who was finding clarity. She asked if we could meet up. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I had to have everything figured out. I didn't feel like I had to be perfect or have all the answers. I just felt open. It wasn't going to be easy. I didn't expect it to be. But I knew that something had changed. Not just in Emily, but in me too. When Emily and I met up again, I had no idea what to expect. I wasn't going in with any agenda, no grand plan to fix everything in one conversation. I didn't even know if we could fix it. But I was open, and that felt like progress. We met at a small cafe in the city, the kind of place we used to go when we were younger. I remember walking in, and there she was, sitting by the window, looking out at the street. She didn't see me right away, so I stood there for a moment, just watching her. She looked different, somehow. More peaceful, maybe. Or maybe I was just seeing her with new eyes. When she finally looked up and saw me, there was this brief, awkward moment where neither of us knew how to start. But then she smiled, a little shy, and my heart did that thing it always did when I saw her. It didn't matter what had happened between us. I still loved her. "Hey," I said, sitting down across from her. "Hey," she replied, her voice soft. There was a little nervousness there, but also something else, something familiar. Something I hadn't heard from her in a long time. We talked for a while about small things, how work was going, how our families were doing, but I could feel the tension hanging in the air. We both knew why we were there, and neither of us was ready to dive into the deep end right away. But then, after a few moments of silence, Emily spoke. "I've been thinking a lot about everything," she said, her eyes meeting mine. "About us, about the space, about what went wrong." I nodded, knowing exactly what she meant. "Me too." She paused, like she was gathering the courage to say what was on her mind. "I think we both got lost in the idea of who we were supposed to be, instead of who we really are. I spent so much time trying to be the perfect partner, and I lost sight of what really matters. I don't know if I was giving you what you needed, Jason. And I don't know if you were giving me what I needed either." I wanted to say something in return, but I had to pause. She was right. We had both been pretending, trying to live up to some ideal version of ourselves. And in doing that, we had forgotten the most important thing, to just be real with each other. "I've been thinking the same thing," I said finally. "I've been so focused on trying to be the perfect guy, the guy I thought you wanted, that I lost sight of who I am. And maybe that's why I couldn't connect with you like I used to. I was too busy worrying about being someone I'm not." There was a long silence between us, but this time, it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence where you're both just sitting with the truth. "Do you think we can fix it?" she asked, her voice quiet but hopeful. I didn't have a definitive answer. I didn't know if we could fix everything, or if we could ever go back to what we once had. But I knew one thing: I wasn't ready to give up. Not on her. Not on us. "I don't know," I said, being honest for the first time in a long time. "But I think we can try. I think we can figure out what it means to be together again, without all the pressure. Without all the expectations. Just us." She smiled, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw the warmth in her eyes again. Not because everything was perfect, but because we were both willing to try. We were willing to be honest with each other, even when it was hard. "I like that," she said softly. And in that moment, I realized something. Love isn't about being perfect. It's not about always getting everything right or having all the answers. It's about showing up for each other, even when things get hard. It's about being willing to grow, to change, to learn together. We didn't have it all figured out, not by a long shot. But for the first time in a long time, we were both willing to try. And that felt like enough. When Emily and I met up again, I had no idea what to expect. It wasn't about fixing everything in one conversation, but just reconnecting. We sat at a cafe, awkward at first, but after a while, the silence between us felt less tense. I could see it in her eyes, she'd changed, and so had I. She finally spoke, breaking the quiet. "I've been thinking a lot about us, about what went wrong." She paused, searching for the right words. "I think we both got lost in trying to be perfect for each other. And I don't think I gave you what you needed. Did I?" I looked at her, feeling that familiar ache in my chest. "I've been doing the same thing," I admitted. "Trying to be someone I thought you wanted. I forgot who I really am." Maybe that's why we drifted. We both sat in silence for a moment, letting the weight of those words sink in. Finally, she asked, "Do you think we can fix it?" I didn't know if we could go back to what we were, but I wasn't ready to give up. "I don't know. But I think we can try, by being real with each other. Without all the pressure." She smiled, a small but genuine smile. "I'd like that." And in that moment I knew, love isn't about being perfect. It's about showing up for each other, willing to grow, even when it's hard. We didn't have all the answers, but we were both willing to try. And that was enough for me. We decided to give it a shot. Emily moved back in, and we started the process of rebuilding, but it wasn't easy. Things weren't magically fixed just because we'd had a heart-to-heart. In fact, I think it was harder than before. We both had old habits, old patterns, that were tough to shake off. I kept catching myself falling back into that old mindset. Trying to be perfect. Trying to do everything right. I wanted to prove to her that I could be the man she needed. But the pressure, it was suffocating. And I could see it in Emily's eyes too. She was trying, but there were moments when I could tell she was holding back, uncertain if this was really the right path. There were small things that got to me. Like when we tried to talk about something important, and it would turn into a misunderstanding, or when I'd get frustrated with her and snap over something insignificant. I thought I had everything figured out, but I was still carrying all that baggage, self-doubt, insecurity, and this constant fear of failure. And I could tell she was struggling with her own version of that. But there were good moments too. Small victories. Like when we'd sit down at dinner, and for the first time in weeks, I'd feel that spark between us again. Laughter, real connection. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And that gave me hope. I started to realize something. Rebuilding takes time. It's not just about talking things through once and moving on. It's about showing up every day, making small changes, and being willing to face the discomfort of change. Emily wasn't expecting perfection. And honestly, neither was I. We just needed to be willing to keep trying, even when it got tough. One evening, as we were cleaning up after dinner, she reached over and squeezed my hand. It wasn't anything grand, just a simple gesture, but it meant everything. It was like she was telling me, without words, that we were in this together. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like we might actually make it. Months passed, and while things weren't perfect, I started to feel real change between us. We were communicating better, listening to each other instead of just reacting. It wasn't about being perfect, it was about showing up every day, trying, even when it was hard. One evening, I came home, and Emily was sitting on the couch, reading. When she looked up and asked how my day was, it felt different. It wasn't just a routine question, it was like she genuinely cared. And for the first time in a long time, I felt the same way about her. We talked for hours, about nothing major, just life, just us. And that's when I realized, real change doesn't happen overnight. It happens in these small, quiet moments, when you keep choosing to be there for each other. We weren't perfect, but we were moving forward together. And that felt like enough. It's funny, you know? I used to think that love was about the big moments, the grand gestures, the perfect dates, the fireworks. But now I realize that love is really about the small moments. The ones that don't make it to social media, the ones that nobody else sees. We're not perfect. We still have our disagreements, our bad days. But we've learned to be real with each other, to accept the flaws and imperfections that we both bring to the table. Emily and I have found something deeper than the version of love I used to chase. It's not about being perfect, it's about being willing to grow, to learn, to stick by each other through the ups and downs. A while ago, we took a weekend trip together. Just the two of us, to get away from everything and recharge. I remember sitting on the porch of the little cabin we rented, watching the sunset. And I realized, for the first time in a long time, that we were in a good place. Not perfect, but real. Together. Love, I've learned, isn't about avoiding the hard stuff. It's about facing it together. It's about getting through the rough patches, not because you're supposed to, but because you want to. You choose each other, day after day, and that's what we're doing now. We've come a long way from where we were, but it feels like we're just getting started. We've both changed, and that's okay. We're stronger together.